to when she died at 26, that is a period of 20 years of documentable evidence/witnesses that she was intellectually disabled and nonverbal. Background. The subject, Kathy, was described as a mute and mentally disabled woman whose brain had been ravaged by repeated and severe attacks of meningitis. She was assumed to have permanent, irreversible brain damage and was considered nonverbal. The setting: she lived in a mental institution where she was a long-term patient, observed by staff who knew her as a person who did not speak or communicate verbally. The observers: the case was reported by Friedrich Happich, the director of the institution, and Wilhelm Wittneben, the chief physician. The event: the moment, as she was dying, Kathy suddenly gained the ability to speak and sing. The song: she sang songs to herself for approximately half an hour before passing away. Content of the singing: witnesses described her singing hymns, specifically repeating the phrase, "Where does the soul find its home? It's peace. Peace, peace, heavenly peace." Appearance: her face, which usually appeared stultified and unresponsive, was described as transfigured and spiritualized during the episode. Reaction of staff: the physician and nurses caring for her were rendered speechless and were in tears, as she was transformed from a seemingly unresponsive person into a songbird at the moment of death. The case is often cited to show that the human mind or consciousness can exist even when the brain appears to be severely damaged. One last example before I conclude this article. The case of the 91-year-old woman described as a well-documented example of terminal lucidity, a phenomenon often referred to as the active return or the surge, where patients with severe, irreversible neurodegenerative diseases suddenly regain cognitive function and mental clarity shortly before death. According to reports referenced by Michael Nam and colleagues studying terminal lucidity, this specific case is outlined as follows. Background: the 91-year-old patient suffered from Alzheimer's disease for 15 years. Previous status: for 5 years prior to her death, she had been unresponsive and showed no signs of recognizing her daughter or any other individuals. The episode: one evening, shortly before her death, the woman unexpectedly became alert. The interaction: she held a normal conversation with her daughter. During this time, she engaged in lucid, articulate communication, specifically discussing her fears regarding death and discussing her relationships with other members of the family. The outcome: the surge of lucidity was temporary. She died a few hours after this interaction. Key aspects of this phenomenon. Paradoxical nature: while the physical brain is profoundly damaged, these patients experience a surge of consciousness. Temporary return: this clarity is temporary and disappears as mysteriously as it appears, usually indicating that death is only hours or days away. Not isolated: this is one of many similar recorded cases, ranging from elderly Alzheimer's patients to those with severe trauma or catatonic conditions. In conclusion, the evidence that I have outlined in this article speaks for itself. Verily, the evidence is insurmountable and cannot just be dismissed without further investigation, but the concrete minds of some skeptics vehemently dismiss supernatural interpretations to explain such phenomena. Obviously, this is done to protect their dogmatic belief system, scientism, but for those who have an open mind will conclude that it is more than likely that the brain is not a producer of consciousness but a processor, filter/receiver, of information, and that consciousness exists independently from the brain. All that happens when bodily death occurs is that consciousness withdraws from this frequency band and enters another frequency band, which it decodes into an experience of leaving one reality and entering another. By the way, I could have included way more paranormal phenomena/experiences, such as people who have missing parts of the brain, up to 90% reduction in size, and they still live normal, functional, and healthy lives that materialism science fails to explain with their outdated model. It is up to the reader to decide for themselves what they make of the information that I have presented in this article. Does life continue after death? You decide.